Hello, welcome to AWS Cloud Practitioner free practice exam. In this course, we will go through 60 questions which are practice questions, but they are realistic questions close to the exam. So we will go through each question and the answers, and also I will give explanations to the each answer how to determine. So the first question, a developer need to maintain a development environment infrastructure and a production environment infrastructure in a repeatable fashion. So what AWS is looking here is, so for you to understand which service should the developer use to meet these requirements. So let's see the options. AWS Batch, AWS IAM, AWS CloudFormation, AWS Outpost. So all the questions in this Cloud Practitioner will be predominantly looking for you to pick the right AWS service, which services meets the requirements. So there won't be any scenario based or solution based answers in this exam. So these are the more practical, realistic questions you will get in the exam. So let's go through, and we will go through each answer and I will explain what each service is meant for, and we will know the right answer here. AWS Batch is actually for batch services. So we cannot use batch to create the infrastructure as the code, right? So in this question, what AWS is looking for you to is whether you understand infrastructure as the code service. So batch is not the answer. And AWS IAM. IAM is for identity access management, for access controls, not for infrastructure as a service. AWS CloudFormation is the infrastructure as a service, so C is the answer. And just to let you know, AWS Outpost is to deploy the AWS services on-premise. Even though we want some of the AWS services on the cloud, similar services if you want on the on-premise hardware infrastructure, we can use AWS Outpost. This is the AWS services which gives that capability. So the answer here is C, AWS CloudFormation. So let's see the second question. According to AWS shared responsibility model, which option is a customer responsibility? Remember, for this exam, you should know what is the customer responsibility, and you should know what is the AWS responsibility, right? So according to the AWS shared responsibility model, which option is a customer responsibility? So there will be good amount of questions in this scenario. So you should know which answers to pick, okay? So the options are patching of DynamoDB tables, access controls of DynamoDB tables, network controls to DynamoDB tables, storage controls to DynamoDB tables. So these are the four options here, and they are looking what is the customer responsibility here. Remember, DynamoDB table is a NoSQL database, and which is a managed service by AWS. So you don't provision the infrastructure and you don't control the network and storage, right, or even patching. So it's a managed serverless NoSQL database, correct? So only thing that you as a customer can control is the access. Like using the IAM roles and access permissions, you can control your DynamoDB tables. So the right answer here is B, access controls. So third question, what advantage company gets when they move from on-premise to AWS cloud? So here the question is looking for your understanding on the cloud advantages, right? So we saw 6 advantages of the cloud computing, right? So you should know those cloud computing advantages. Based on that, you can answer this question. So consolidated cost to AWS only. So that's the advantage. Are discounts available same as hardware providers provide, or avoid operational cost, or avoid expenses for running and maintaining the data centers? See, just to tell the answer here, but I wanted to evaluate all the options so that you get more understandings on the options. See, consolidating cost to AWS only is not the advantage. You might still have some cost outside the AWS also. That's not the main goal of the advantage, right? So discounts available, no, AWS doesn't give discounts as the hardware providers does, right? It's irrelevant. avoiding the operational cost. No, even though you move your workloads on AWS, you still have operational cost. Basically, instead of doing an on-prem operational cost, you will be doing your team, still you need an operational team who will be doing operational maintenance on the AWS. So the D option is avoid expenses for running and maintaining the data centers. Okay, so this is the option you should look for. So avoiding, so you don't, the advantage of cloud computing is you can avoid running and maintaining the data centers cost, right? So D is the answer. Okay. So let me check why the screen is frozen. Let me again try to capture and okay. So just for the sake, because the screen was frozen, so I will go back to the questions 1 onwards again very quickly. So the question number 1 was a developer need to maintain and a development environment infrastructure and a production environment infrastructure in a repeatable fashion. Correct. So the AWS service should the developer use is infrastructure as the code, which is AWS cloud formation, right? So that's the answer. And for the question number 2, according to the AWS shared responsibility model, which option is a customer responsibility, right? As I was mentioning, DynamoDB is a NoSQL database, which is a managed service. So the access controls of the DynamoDB tables is the only thing you can control. Network, storage, patching, and all is AWS managed service. So AWS will maintain it, right? So B is the answer. Okay, and for the third question, what advantage company gets when they move from on-premise workloads to the AWS cloud? So as I was mentioning, avoiding the operational cost or discounts or consolidated cost to AWS is not the options. The main advantage what you get is you will avoid expenses for running and maintaining the data centers. Okay, so D is the answer here. So fourth question. A music company wants to manage deployed IT services and govern its infrastructure as the code template. Which AWS service will meet the requirements here? See, as I was mentioning, infrastructure as a code on AWS is cloud formation. But what they are looking here is the service that will templatize the infrastructure as the code, and we can use using that service we can deploy the infrastructures. So this sits on top of the infrastructure as the cloud formation. So in AWS there is a free service that you can use to manage the infrastructure as the code templates. So basically cloud formation templates. So if you evaluate the options, AWS organization is for managing the multiple AWS accounts. It's not to manage the infrastructure as the code. And then AWS Cost Explorer, as I was mentioning in the tutorials videos, AWS Cost Explorer is primarily to evaluate or assess your cost metrics, right? Not for managing the infrastructure as the code. And AWS Service Catalog, this is the answer. So AWS Service Catalog is the service which can manage the infrastructure as the code. And AWS Systems Manager is primarily meant to manage the fleet of EC2 servers on AWS. So all these are valid services, but they are not, all are not meant to manage the infrastructure as the code. So only the AWS Service Catalog meant for the infrastructure as the code. So C is the answer. Okay. So let's evaluate question number 5. Which AWS service or tool helps users visualize, understand and manage spending and usage over time? So the options here are organizations, again Cost Explorer, Service Catalog and Pricing Calculator. Okay, again as I was mentioning, AWS organizations is meant for managing the multiple AWS accounts under one master account, so that you can billing, invoice and access controls can be done from the master account. Cost Explorer is the one actually meets the question here, which is helps you to visualize, understand and manage the spending and the usage. Correct. Service Catalog, as I was mentioning previous question, it is meant for managing the infrastructure as the code. And pricing calculator, AWS has a free service that you can do pricing calculator to estimate the cost. Even before designing and deploying your workloads, you can use AWS pricing calculator to calculate the cost. So the answer in 5 is Cost Explorer, right? So let's go to question number 6. So a global company wants to migrate its third-party appliances to the AWS cloud. The company wants help from a global team of experts to complete the migration in more reliable in accordance with the AWS internal best practices. Which AWS service or resource will meet the requirements? So what they are looking here is AWS has a capability to provide you if any companies cannot do themselves migrations to the cloud, and if they don't know how cloud migration or cloud journey, AWS has a service that can help from the third party team. So that you can achieve via what feature of AWS or a resource. So AWS support center is there for you to open any tickets related to AWS. So that's not the answer. And AWS professional services, actually this is the answer, professional services. So just remember, this will come in the exams. So AWS has a professional services. If companies cannot do themselves cloud migration, they can use AWS professional services. AWS service catalog, as I was mentioning again, it is meant to manage the infrastructure as the code, okay? And AWS managed services is just a term. There is no specific service or a resource. So for question number 6, the answer is B. Question number 7, a company need to run an application for 3 months every year without downtime. So the application will be deployed on Amazon EC2 instances. So which EC2 purchase option will meet the requirements? Remember I was mentioning, so AWS EC2 has 4 pricing options. You can have on demand, reserved, spot and dedicated. Each one is meant for each purpose. So if you read the question again, the application has to run 3 months every year without downtime. So when you don't want to expect a downtime, spot instances can be downtime, right? Spot instances are the cheapest cost for you. It is like a bidding and you will get the lowest cost, but AWS can take out that instances at any time. So downtime is possible. So you cannot use spot instances, right? So, and you need only 3 months. Reserved instances is where you will purchase for 1 year, 3 year terms, right? If you want to run your servers for next 1 year, 3 year, you do upfront commitment and they will give you 30% to 50% discount. That is reserved instances. And dedicated host is where you will choose EC2s when you have softwares running on EC2 which are required to have a dedicated license. They cannot be shared EC2's hardware with the another EC2s in the data center of AWS cloud regions, right, or availability zones. So it's not dedicated host, it is not, cannot be reserved instance, because only you need to run 3 months in every year. So it cannot be spot instance because downtime, we don't want downtime. So on demand is the best option here, right? So 7th one is D is the answer. Sorry. 7th one, D is the answer, okay? If I move to 8th question. So in 8th question, a developer want to deploy an application quickly on AWS without manually creating the required resources. So which AWS service will meet these requirements, okay? So you see the options here: AWS Code Build, AWS Elastic Beanstalk, AWS Code Pipeline, Amazon ECS, right? So in this question, what the AWS will be looking your ability to identify a service that you don't need to manually create the resources. It's a managed service actually. See, code build, code pipelines are like DevOps tools like GitHub, GitLab, right? So where you do pipelines, right? DevOps pipelines. So they are code build and code pipelines. AWS has equivalent. But they are not for automatically creating, right? We still need to write the script if you wanted to even deploy the infrastructures. So they are only meant for deployments of DevOps CI/CD pipelines, not for provisioning the infrastructure. And Amazon ECS is a elastic container service where you have to provision the infrastructure and all. So the answer here is B, Elastic Beanstalk. Remember, AWS has a service called Amazon Elastic Beanstalk, which is a managed free service. You don't need to manually create EC2, network load balancer, routing, security, all those things. Beanstalk will create all the required resources. You need to just provide the configuration what you want. Okay. So for 8, B is the answer. If I move on to the question number 9, a retail company is storing sensitive customer data in a Amazon S3 bucket. The company want to protect the data from accidental deletion or overwriting. So what S3 features should the company use to meet these requirements? So in this question, what they are looking for you is to understand the S3 bucket features. Okay, so Amazon S3 bucket is a object storage service, right? It is highly scalable and highly available and very robust object storage service. I think we discussed about this service in our course also, right? This is equivalent to your Google Drive or Dropbox or Microsoft, like those. So in Amazon S3 bucket, what will help you accidentally deletion or overwriting? So the question is looking for you which feature. Okay, so you have 4 options here. S3 bucket supports versioning, yes. S3 bucket supports lifecycle also. Again, lifecycle is meant to move the object from one storage to another storage so that you can reduce the cost by moving the object from hot storage to cold storage. So that is for S3 bucket lifecycle. And S3 bucket storage types itself is not for accidental deletion. And S3 bucket has policies also, but those S3 bucket policies are to restrict the access, whether this bucket can be publicly accessible or private bucket, and if it is private bucket, which application or which IAM users or service accounts can access S3 bucket. So S3 bucket policies are access control policies, not the answer here. If you want to really accidental deletion or overwriting, bucket versioning is the important one. So you should enable the S3 bucket versioning. Just remember this, okay, capability. So for 9A is the answer. So coming to the 10, DevOps engineer is building infrastructure as code to manage the AWS workloads. So which service will meet here? Okay, so if I see the options in 10, so this is again a repeated question, right? I mean the answer is repeated, not the question itself. So they are again looking for you what infrastructure as the code service you have on AWS which will be useful. So again, code pipeline, code deploy are DevOps tools, but not for infrastructure as the code. They are purposefully meant for creating the pipelines and deployments. So they are part of the CI/CD process. AWS has code commit, code build, code deploy, code pipeline. These are the 4 services, remember, useful in the DevOps CI/CD lifecycle, not for building the infrastructure. So in AWS, the infrastructure as the code service is Cloud Formation. Remember this service, AWS Cloud Formation. And there are open source very popular infrastructure as the code service called Terraform. But here what we will be looking is AWS Cloud Formation because it's very AWS specific questions. So C is the answer. Again, just to tell you what is D, remember we discussed in the course, AWS Direct Connect is for building the network communication between on-prem to any nearby AWS cloud. You will use Direct Connect. And AWS Transit Gateway is for building the communication, network communication between one AWS resource to another AWS resource. So those are network services, right? So here what they are looking is infrastructure as the code. So C is the answer. So let's go to the question number 11. Company need to run its workload on Amazon EC2 instance for 1 year, remember. So the traffic is consistent and any increase in traffics are predictable. So there is a predictable traffic here. The EC2 instances must be online and available without any disruption. So there cannot be any downtime. So what AWS service will meet these requirements? So again, they are looking for which AWS pricing model you will pick, right? So as I was mentioning, spot instances has downtime and they cannot have any disruption. So spot instance won't help. And on-demand instances are high costly. If you want really cost effective, they said like they are okay to commit for 1 year, right? And so reserved instances is the best option here. So it's not dedicated hardware, and not on demand or spot instances. So reserved instance is the best option, right? So for 11, A is the answer. So going to the question number 12, which AWS service or feature allows a user to establish a dedicated network connection between the company's on-premise data center and AWS cloud? So I was just talking about this service in previous questions, right? So let's evaluate the answers. AWS CloudFront. AWS CloudFront, we discussed in our course, it is a CDN, content delivery network, so that you can deliver your websites or APIs cached across the globe. So content delivery network is the CloudFront. And AWS Route 53, we discussed this also. AWS Route 53 is a DNS service, right? So which is for DNS resolutions, like you give apple.com the website and it will resolve the website domain to an IP address. So that is AWS Route 53. AWS VPN is again a VPN connection, right? Virtual private network connection between your on-prem to data center, right? So from between on-prem data center to AWS cloud, you can have VPN, but what they are asking you is dedicated network. VPN is not dedicated. VPN is again over the internet. So it's just encrypts the tunnel of the network. So AWS VPN. Remember the answer here is D, direct connect. Okay. Whenever you need a dedicated network, it is direct connect. And if you are okay to use internet but you just want to encrypt the network, it is VPN. AWS VPN is cheaper and direct connect is expensive because it's a dedicated network and you will have enough bandwidth. So but here they are asking for dedicated network, so answer is D. So now going to question number 13. Which option is a physical location of the AWS global infrastructure? We discussed about this also in our course. So AWS infrastructure starts with regions and availability zones, right? So the question asking here is what is the physical location of a AWS global infrastructure? So the answer itself is A here. So AWS regions. So regions, in India we have Mumbai region, Hyderabad region, London we have a region, in Europe. So just to give examples, right? In US we have Ohio, Virginia, like those regions, right? So those are the physical locations, but within the region there are more than 2 availability zones and each availability zone is a data center. So since we have region as the option here, that's the most appropriate. AWS data sync is a service to synchronize the data. So that's not the service here what we are talking. Again, AWS organization is not a physical location service. It is it's a service on AWS where we can manage multiple AWS accounts under a master account. Okay, remember. Amazon Connect, just to let you know, note this service. Amazon Connect is a call center backend supporting service, okay, where we can have customer relationship management service, okay, that is Amazon Connect. So for 13 the answer is A. So now let me go to 14th question. So why we need internet gateway? So the options here are to create a VPN connection to VPC, to establish communication between the private and public subnets, to establish communication between the VPC and internet, to create a direct connection to VPC. So if you understand the internet gateway, so in a very general terminologies, right, why we need internet gateways? To get the internet, correct? So this is not to create a VPN connection to VPC. To create a VPN connection, we need VPN gateway, not internet gateway, remember. And to establish connections between the private and public subnets, all we need is within a VPC, we don't need any special, it's just by providing the security groups we can have. And to establish the connection between communication between VPC resources and internet, this is the appropriate answer. We need internet gateway. And to create a direct connect connection, as I was mentioning, all we need is AWS direct connect, not the internet gateway. So for 14 the answer is C. So let me go to question number 15. The company wants to audit its password and access key rotation details for compliance purpose. Which AWS service or tool will meet the requirement? Again, in this question, they are looking what feature or service of AWS will help you to meet this, right? So for question number 15, what they are asking is they wanted to audit in AWS. We have IAM, right? We discussed it. IAM is for Identity Access Management. All the users who log in into AWS are managed in AWS IAM. So a company wants to audit on the passwords and access key rotation details. So remember, AWS IAM has credentials report. So that's the answer. We can download the credentials report. If you go to AWS IAM console and see, there is a credentials report. Even if you don't want a hands-on, you just want to take the exam, remember AWS IAM has credentials report. And I will just explain what are the other options so that you might understand the services as we are evaluating these answers, and that might help in your other questions also. AWS Artifact is for downloading any compliance reports of AWS. Okay, we discussed about this also in our course video, right? AWS Artifacts is where you wanted to download whether AWS is PCI compliant or HIPAA compliant or any certificates you want from AWS to prove that you are using AWS and AWS is compliant in that region or that service. You need to give to your auditors. You can download the reports from the AWS Artifact location, okay, of the service. So that's Artifact. IAM Access Analyzer, option C, is also a valid service, but not for this question. For IAM Access Analyzer, you will be using this IAM Access Analyzer whenever you need to analyze the IAM permissions. Example, you are building an application and you created an IAM policy to access a DynamoDB or S3 bucket or some AWS resources, and you wanted to know, does the IAM permission can communicate with the resource, if whether it will work or don't work, or if it is not working, you are troubleshooting. If you wanted to troubleshoot your permissions policies, IAM Access Analyzer is there. So it's not for getting the passwords and access key rotations report. And AWS audit reports is not a valid option at all. There is nothing like that. So for 15, answer is AWS IAM credentials report, A. So let's go to question number 16. Which AWS service or resource provides answers to the most frequently asked security related questions that AWS receives from its users, right? So this is a very general question. What they are trying to do is, if you have most frequently asked questions and you wanted to get from AWS, what is your option? Again, Artifact is for compliance reports, right? Audit reports. Amazon Connect is for call center service, right? For it's a call center service. You have to use the service for your applications and your company call centers, not for AWS call center. Okay, that is AWS support. If you want to reach the AWS support team. Okay, AWS Knowledge Center. Remember, this is the answer. Okay, AWS Knowledge Center is there. It's basically a documentation where you can go and check most frequently asked questions. So in this certification, AWS is trying to see, do you know where to go if you have any questions, okay? And AWS doesn't have any free chatbot that you can do, but as part of the AWS support itself, you can open a case and you can chat with the call center representative of AWS support team, but that's not chatbot, okay? So for 16, the C is the answer. So now I am going to question number 17. Which of the following are pillars of the AWS well architecture framework? Okay, so remember, AWS well architecture has 6 pillars. Okay, so in the well architecture, the 2 pillars what you need to know are to give. Let me go through the options. Disaster recovery is not an well architecture pillar, disaster recovery itself. Okay, then B is availability, right? Then C is reliability. D is scalability and operational excellence. Just you need to remember, AWS well architecture has 6 pillars. Okay, just I will name for you here so that you can remember, note down. Operational excellence, okay, and reliability, and so those are the 2 among the remaining 6 pillars. Scalability is not a pillar itself, and availability is not a pillar itself, and disaster recovery is not. So just note down reliability and operational excellence, okay, are the 2 pillars among the other 6 pillars, okay, of AWS architecture. The other two are something like eco sustainability is the one more pillar which is not here, right? Sustainability is another pillar, and security related is another pillar, so it's not here. So just remember reliability and operational excellence. Okay, these are the two. You need to just remember these 6 pillars of the well architecture to answer these. So here it is C and E. So it's a multiple choice question. Okay, so let me go to question number 18. Which AWS service or feature is used to send both text and email messages from distributed applications, right? So they're asking you to find out a service which can send both text and email messages. We discussed about this service in our video course also. Is it Amazon Simple Email Service, SES, or Amazon Simple Notification Service, SNS, or Amazon Simple Queue Service, SQS, or Amazon CloudWatch Alerts? See, CloudWatch Alerts itself cannot send an email or a text message, so it's taken out. C, SQS, option C, SQS is a queue based service like MQ or Apache MQ or IBM MQ, like that. It's a queue service, so not C is not the option here. So SES can send email, but it cannot send a text message. We discussed Amazon SNS service in our course, can do application to application as a topic. Also it can do application to person as a text and push notifications to the mobile. So Amazon SNS is the option here. Okay, so for 18, B is the answer. So let me go to 19. Which option below provides the programmatic access to AWS resources through AWS CLI and AWS APIs? So they are looking for which service will help you, or which option will help you to get the access. Whether it's Amazon organizations, no, that doesn't give you any permissions. It's just to manage the multiple accounts, right, under a master account. It doesn't give you any programmatic access or any credentials. SSH public keys, they are meant for connecting the EC2 instances via public private keys, via PuTTY or WinSAP or like those, any SSH tunneling tools to connect with the Linux machines. IAM MFA, multi-factor authentication, is meant for protecting any user's login credentials, right? Additional security. It doesn't give you programmatic access. What you need to programmatically access AWS is access keys. Okay, AWS IAM access keys. So remember the answer for 19 is D. So if I go to question number 20, a retail company information security team would like to block SQL injections attacks. What AWS service or feature meets this requirement? We discussed it during our video course also. Let me go through the options and explain you. NACLs or network ACLs are for network security, for the like a firewall or network security. You wanted to control the traffic going in and out. Network access control list, NACLs will help. So this is not meant for SQL injections or any fraudster preventing any hacking attacks or anything like that, right? Not for that. AWS Shield, remember this is a very important service we discussed in our video. AWS Shield and Shield Advanced. AWS Shield is primarily meant for DDoS or brute force protection, right? The distributed denial of service, DDoS attacks, not for SQL injections. AWS WAF is the right answer here. Using AWS WAF, you can do SQL injection attacks protection. And D is a security groups, that's meant for again network resources, securing the resources access, correct? That is AWS security groups, okay, which is at the resource instance level, EC2 level. You can block which port can be accessed. If your application is running in a EC2 server on port 8080, you can open only the port 8080 can be accessible from your client application or anywhere from the internet using security groups. So remember, network ACLs and security groups are primarily for securing the network traffic and port traffic, but WAF is for SQL injection or web application firewalls, okay, primarily meant for SQL injection attacks or preventions. AWS Shield is for DDoS protection, okay, so the answer here is C. If I go to question number 21, a company stores its critical data in S3 bucket. Which AWS service or feature helps identifying whether S3 bucket or IAM role has been shared externally. So the company is storing some data in Amazon S3 and they wanted to know by accidentally or by any reason the data is shared or somebody has access from external internet. So they wanted to understand whether this bucket has any special access, and I was mentioning about this in previous questions, right? AWS has IAM access analyzer so that you can analyze the access, how it works, okay? And AWS IAM credentials is primarily meant for programming access, so not the B. Again, AWS organization is meant for managing the multiple AWS accounts. AWS Inspector, there is a service AWS Inspector in the security services of AWS. AWS Inspector is primarily meant within the EC2 to check any anomalies or detections and all. So it is not meant for S3 bucket. IAM role has been provided external access or not. If you want to know that, IAM access analyzer is the answer. Okay. So 21 is A. So let me go to 22. Even though the workloads are migrated from an on-premise AWS cloud, which cost is still the company responsibility. Okay, again here the cloud computing fundamentals and shared responsibility models which we discussed in our course videos will help to answer this, right? So what is still the company responsibility or the customer responsibility? AWS data center cost. No, AWS will manage their data center cost, right? Customer doesn't need to do this. Software license cost, you can say here, right? But let's see C&D. AWS hardware cost. No, again, not customer won't pay anything to manage for the hardware. That's why we moved to AWS, so that AWS will manage the infrastructure and security cost also. So A, C, D is AWS responsibility. B, still the softwares, Oracle, SQL servers, any third-party softwares you deploy on AWS, customer has to manage the software license cost. So for 22, B is the answer. So 23, which AWS service enables customers to audit API calls in their AWS accounts? So they are looking for understanding you a service that is important in AWS that will help you to audit the API calls. Okay, so again this we discussed in our course video again. So but let me go through the other options also so that you will learn what are the services meant for, right? AWS Inspector, as I was mentioning, it is for detection within the EC2 for any anomaly detections, correct? AWS Trusted Advisor, again it is specific to the for the AWS security purpose, not for the API calls audit. Okay, AWS X-ray. AWS X-ray is for automatic detection of your troubleshooting logs or the services, or it is like a Splunk, Dynatrace, any APM tools. Okay, you can, and you might be watching noticing this Amazon AWS X-ray even on your Amazon Prime videos, right? It automatically detects the cast, the crew of the movie and the characters of them. So who is the hero, heroine, or the actors, right? So that's Amazon X-ray. So it's for detecting, scanning and detecting, right, within your services or any issues or those kind of things. So it's not for auditing the API calls. Amazon Cloud, AWS Cloud Trail, remember, is the service to audit the API calls. And Cloud Watch is for your application logs. There is another service, so don't confuse between Cloud Watch and Cloud Trail. Okay, so the answer here is Cloud Trail. So if I go to question number 24, what is a customer responsibility when using AWS Lambda according to the shared responsibility model? Again, so remember, AWS Lambda is a managed service. So again, AWS is trying to understand, looking you what understanding you have on the shared responsibility model, right? AWS Lambda. So again, AWS Lambda is a managed service like DynamoDB, right? So in AWS Lambda, hardware of the Lambda function we don't manage, correct? So it's not a customer responsibility. Source code within the Lambda function makes sense, correct? But let's evaluate C&D. Operating system of Lambda function, no, we don't need to manage. Patching, no, we don't need to manage because it's a serverless managed AWS compute service. So the answer is B here. So if I go to question number 25, which AWS service helps run the SQL queries against data stored in Amazon S3 bucket? This is a very important service, very popular service as part of data analytics, and I have some cloud labs also on this. If anybody wants to do hands-on, can do that. So just to evaluate the answers, Redshift, it is Amazon Redshift is a data warehouse database. Okay, remember, it's not for any running the SQL queries in S3 bucket. Okay, and Amazon RDS is a relational database which we discussed during our video course. So it is primarily for databases, right? Various database services. Amazon Athena, it is actually the answer. SQL queries you can run using Amazon Athena on S3 bucket data. And Amazon Kinesis is a data streaming service. You have data streams and video streams in Kinesis. So remember, Athena is the SQL queries you can run against the Amazon S3 bucket. For example, let's assume you have a corpus of data or bunch of data in CSV files or JSON files in S3 bucket, and you want to run some SQL queries. You can use the Amazon Athena to query the Amazon S3 bucket data and run like ANSI SQLs. Okay, that's the primary use cases of data analytics teams, right? So that's the answer. So Amazon Athena. So let's go to question number 26. Which AWS service can be used at no additional cost? So they are looking for you to identify which service doesn't come with a cost. AWS CloudWatch, we know this is for log troubleshooting and log monitoring and all, and CloudWatch comes with a cost. SageMaker is a machine learning service, it comes with a cost. CloudTrail also, as I mentioned, purpose of the CloudTrail is to audit the APIs of the AWS, it comes with a cost. AWS Organizations is the free service, you don't pay for AWS Organizations. This is just a logical grouping of the multiple AWS accounts you can manage under one master account. Because as I was mentioning during the video courses, every organization will have more than multiple AWS accounts to manage in production, non-prod and all. So AWS Organizations will help to manage the AWS multiple accounts. Okay, so it's a free service, remember. So 26 is C. So if I go to the question number 27, a company is exploring the use of the AWS cloud and need to create a cost estimation. So they wanted to estimate the cost even before the infrastructure is provisioned. Okay, so which AWS service will help here to do the cost estimations? Remember, AWS free tier is not a cost estimation tool. It just tells you what AWS services are free and how much are free to use during the free tier. So not helps you cost estimations. I have labs on this, so I would like you to go through if you have wanted to do some readings and videos, tutorials. AWS budgets, again I have a lab here if you wanted to understand. We discussed about this also in our previous video course. AWS budgets are meant to put an alerts whenever our spending going to forecasted to cross the budget what we put, right? So that's for AWS budgets. Billing reports just gives you how much is your past spend, correct? What was your invoice and all. So the answer is D, pricing calculator. AWS has a free pricing calculator, like it will look like a spreadsheet, but it is a service on the UI. You can fill the details with all the drop downs and all what services you will be using, and it will give you the estimated cost, okay, how much it will be before even you designing it. So for 27 the answer is D. So let's go to 28. Which option is a benefit of the economics of scale based on the advantages of cloud computing? So this is again the benefits of cloud computing, what they are looking, right? So if I just look at the answers, increase the speed and agility. Okay, so it's not economics of scale. Remember, this question might come in your exam. Economics of scale means just remember that you don't need to pay upfront. You will pay as you are going, pay as you go. Only when your business is doing good, you will use the AWS services more, then you will pay more. If startup companies cannot do huge capital investment even before they getting the revenue from their business, right? As your business is growing, as your revenue is growing, if you wanted to pay to the AWS, that is called economics of scale. So lower variable cost over the fixed cost, right? So that's the answer here. But just to evaluate the other one, increased operational cost across data center, that's not economic scale. It actually we are not it's not by saving the operational cost. And trade variable expense, we are not trading, actually we are for fixed expense. It's a reverse, we are trading the fixed expense and we are for variable expense. So the answer is B here. So remember, economics of scale is rather paying fixed cost upfront on-prem, we are paying the variable cost as we are growing. So that's economics of scale of the cloud, advantage of cloud computing. So for 28, the answer is B. So let me go to question number 29. Which AWS service is again available at no cost? I just want you to know, we had the similar question and the options were organization, right? Amazon organization is a free. So there is another service also in AWS which is free of cost. AWS IAM is a free cost. You don't pay for IAM. Amazon S3, yes, it has cost. AWS WAF, it has cost. AWS Elastic Load Balancer, it has cost. If you want to understand which has cost and which doesn't have, I have a video course of evaluating all the free services there. You can notice IAM is not even there. So remember, AWS IAM, AWS organizations are free of cost services. Even the Beanstalk, which we had one of the question, right, where you don't need to manually provision the infrastructure, it will automatically create. Even the Amazon Elastic Beanstalk is a free service. Okay, remember these services. So for 29, the answer is A. So now I am going to question number 30. Which AWS service is fully managed and can automatically scale throughput to meet the data world demands? So they are looking for identify the service which is a fully managed and high throughput service. Remember, Redshift is a data warehouse service. It is not an automatically scalable service. It is something you have to provision. Amazon RDS is again a relational database. You have to provision the capacity. It is not a serverless auto scaling service. Amazon Aurora is also another flavor of relational database and you have to manage the infrastructure. So Amazon DynamoDB, which we discussed in our video course, Amazon DynamoDB is the NoSQL database which is highly scalable and throughput. Okay. Similarly, Amazon Lambda, which is a compute side highly scalable service, right? Similarly, Amazon DynamoDB is the NoSQL highly scalable, high throughput managed database. Okay, so answer is B here. So question number 31. A company developer need EC2 instance for testing an application. The application testing team can be interrupted. So remember these words. Okay, they can be interrupted. So they don't need to run continuously. And which purchase option will meet these requirements? So this also we discussed during our video course and we had similar questions also. There is a possibility the answers could repeat the concept they might be testing, evaluating in the exam to look for you. Okay, and these are the realistic questions will come in your exam for cloud practitioner. Again, if you notice all these questions so far, you don't need really hands-on or like a developer experience or anything. That's why cloud practitioner exam is the first exam anybody without AWS knowledge or any IT knowledge, non-IT software engineer, software company job roles people also can do, managerial roles also. Okay, coming back to the 31 options. Dedicated host we discussed, right? It's specific, it's a high cost and it is meant for wherever we have softwares we wanted to install with a dedicated host, correct? For licensing purpose. On demand, okay, is where you don't want to interrupt it, right? Which is under reserved instances is where you have commitment for 1 year, 5 years, you can purchase reserved instances. Where they are asking here is the cheapest cost, lowest cost option, and they are saying it can be interrupted. If you are okay to interrupt the EC2 instances, the lowest cost is spot instances. So remember, so the cost wise, the spot instance is the lowest cost. After that, the lowest cost is reserved instances. After that, on demand and dedicated host is the highest cost. Because the option D matches the requirement here, spot instance is the answer here. For 31, option D is the answer. So let's go to 32. Which AWS service gives user the ability to discover and protect sensitive data that is stored in Amazon S3 bucket? So this service we have not really discussed in our previous video sessions, but I just want to talk about here. If you remember the name, that's good enough. There is only one service. Remember Amazon MACHI, MACIE, option C is the option. That service will automatically detect in AWS S3 bucket data if any sensitive data is there. Often these companies need these requirements. For example, companies might be storing lot of data in S3 buckets, consumer data, driving licenses, passports, we don't know. So if we wanted to detect if any sensitive data exists, it's not easy to manually check in the images or the JSON files or CSS files, huge data that is in S3 bucket, right? Using Amazon MACHI, you can scan the S3 bucket data and determine if any sensitive data exists. Just remember, if this question comes, sensitive data detection in S3 bucket, Amazon MACHI is the solution. Amazon Inspector, I discussed it, guard duty, inspector is for EC2 security services, security use cases. Guard duty is for AWS security again, not for S3 bucket. Amazon IAM is a overall identity access management service, right? It is not for S3 bucket, specifically anomaly RP sensitive data detection. So for 32, the answer is C. So let's go to 33. Which of the following network services can be used to block network to an instance? Okay, so we have to choose two options here, and I was discussing about these options in previous questions. Remember, CloudTrail is for API audit, CloudWatch is for your application logs, network ACLs, I talked about it, right? For any network traffic security, network ACLs is the option, and security groups. Remember these two terminologies. Amazon IAM is also not meant for network services or blocking or securing them, correct? So C and E is the answers. So if I go to 34 question, which AWS service can identify when an Amazon EC2 instance was terminated? Okay, so if you wanted to know an EC2 is terminated, where you can go and check. Just I wanted to talk out, okay, the options that we can eliminate. Amazon IAM is not meant for that, right? It is for identity access, not for checking EC2 is stopped or not. Event bridge in Amazon is a cron job, okay? If you wanted to do any scheduling using event bridge, you can schedule the jobs and run, remember that. CloudWatch is for your application logs. CloudWatch will not have server logs or EC2 logs, remember. If you are you can forward them, but it is meant for the logs. This doesn't have whether the EC2 instance is stopped or not. If you wanted to know that, that is the API activity log of Amazon management log. So that's Amazon CloudTrail, okay. So 34 is CloudTrail. 35. Which of the following is a fully managed PostgreSQL compatible database? If you remember in the video course, we've gone through this. Among Amazon RDS databases, DynamoDB is a NoSQL database, right? We discussed. Aurora is a RDS database which is compatible with Postgres and MySQL. So answer is B. Just to talk about other options, Amazon DocumentDB is a MongoDB compatible JSON based database. You need to just remember the databases names, okay? And Amazon S3 is a object storage service. So option for 35 is B. So 36. Which AWS service supports a hybrid architecture that gives users the ability to extend AWS infrastructure, AWS services, APIs and tools to data centers, co-location environments or on-premise facilities? Basically, they are looking for you to identify a service AWS has where you can have hybrid architecture. Some of the AWS services can be even run on-prem. So I was talking about the service in the previous questions. If you remember the answer, it is Amazon Outposts, okay. And to evaluate the other options, just wanted to tell you, remember this service. If you ever see in the question, you wanted to have your AWS services on-prem infrastructure also, Outpost, remember the word. The other options, Amazon Snowball. Snowball is a service where you can transfer the data, like example pen drives. We transfer the data via pen drives from one computer to another computer, right? Like that, if you wanted to transfer the data from on-prem to cloud, you can use snowball devices. Okay. And Amazon RDS is a database service. It is not meant to have on-prem deployment, right? It is only works on AWS. Amazon Direct Connect is for network communication, right? Between the on-prem to cloud. So these are not the answers. So Outpost is the answer. So 36A is the answer. Okay. 37. Which AWS service can run a managed MySQL database that provides online transaction processing for OLTP, right? If it was a data warehouse, as I was mentioning, Redshift is the Amazon data warehouse OLAP use case. Online analytical processing, OLAP. OLTP is online transaction processing, real-time OLTP, right? So, and they're asking MySQL. You can easily evaluate. DynamoDB is a NoSQL database, key value pair. So we cannot have MySQL database on DynamoDB. S3 bucket is object storage. It is not a database at all. So the option is answer C, Amazon RDS. Okay. So now if I go to question number 38, which AWS service is a key value database that provides sub-milliseconds latency? Right, we were talking about this service a lot. I hope you can identify the service. S3 is not a database, RDS is not a key value pair, Redshift is for data warehouse. These are all relational databases. S3 is not even a database. So DynamoDB is the key value NoSQL database. So for 38, answer is A. So if I go to 39, which AWS service provides command line access, CLI, to AWS tools and resources directly from the web browser? Remember, there is a service on AWS where you don't need to connect the AWS tools or resources from any third-party tools like Putty or WinSCP, like those things. You can SSH commands or anything. There is a service on AWS you can directly use. It is called Cloud Shell. Okay. So AWS Cloud Shell is one you can use to directly access the AWS resources from web browser via CLI commands. Okay. So 39D is the answer. Amazon Workspaces, just to evaluate the other options so that you will learn about them. Amazon Workspaces is meant for, like you want your organization or anybody wanted to have multiple virtual machines. VDA is for the dev team, QA team to have. So that's called Amazon Workspaces. Cloud HSM is for key management service, KMS service, okay, for encrypting, decrypting the data. It is not for command line access. Cloud Map, there is no service like that, so it's irrelevant. So AWS Cloud Shell, remember, okay, 39 Cloud Shell. 40. A company wants to establish a schedule for rotating database user credentials. Okay, so they want to automatically rotate the credentials with the least amount of operational overhead. So they don't want to manage rotating the credentials of the database. Which service will help? So Amazon RDS option is a database. It itself doesn't have capability to rotate the credentials. So remember, it is just a database. It cannot rotate the credentials itself. So we need some other service. Okay. And AWS IAM is just an identity access management service. It is not for anything to do with the database credentials. AWS Secret Manager stores the secrets, and AWS Secret Manager also can store the database credentials also, and it has capability to rotate them also. So remember, if this question might come in your exam for sure, and AWS Secrets Manager is the answer. Whenever you see, if you want to store any secured credentials in AWS Secret Manager, even if you want to automatically rotate, Secret Manager. AWS Parameter Stores, so that you know if this kind of question comes, it's for non-secure data. Okay, you cannot store any secure data in the parameter store. Neither you cannot store secure data like database credentials, also it cannot rotate. Okay, so answer for 40 is C. So let me go to 41. Which AWS service is used to provide encryption for EBS volumes? So In AWS there is a very popular service. If you wanted to encrypt any data, okay, at rest, that is I will go through those other options so that you will know. Amazon Config is a service for config management, nothing to do with encryption or decryption. AWS IAM is again only for identity access management. It cannot do encryption, decryptions. Parameter store, as I was talking, it's only to store any non-secure data like environmental variables. Okay. So Amazon KMS, key management service, is the service meant for encrypting and decrypting the data. Okay. So Amazon KMS is the answer. 42. Which task is the customer's responsibility according to the AWS shared responsibility model? Again, this is evaluating how much you know about what is AWS responsibility and your responsibility, right? So let's evaluate the options. Configuring environmental controls. No, we don't care, right? It is not customer responsibility. AWS will take care of the environment of the regions and data centers, right? Configuring the physical security. No. Network. No, right? Configuring the firewalls and networks. It is a customer responsibility to configure our workloads, firewalls and networks. So answer is D. If I go to 43, this is also one of the important service. Question might come, so just remember the answer here. Which AWS service will help deliver high available applications with fast failover from multi-region, multi-AZ architectures? If you want workloads in multiple regions and if you want a very fast failover, what service will give you very fast failover capability? So AWS Global Accelerator, AWS WAF options. WAF is again a web application firewall. It is for security purpose to block any SQL injection, hacking attack on your fraudster attack, hacking attack on your workloads, right? It's an application firewall, like a network firewall. It is a web application firewall. It's not meant for failure of the network service, right? AWS Shield is DDoS, we discussed. So AWS VPN is a communication network between the on-prem to the cloud. So the answer is Global Accelerator. Remember this. For 43. 44. A compliance officer need to get the compliance related information and reports from AWS. Which service will help? As I was discussing this in multiple times in previous question options. So, but let me evaluate the answers. Marketplace. AWS has a marketplace. What is AWS marketplace? Is a third party companies can provide their softwares and you can subscribe to their softwares via AWS marketplace. So it is basically to purchase any third party softwares through the AWS marketplace. It is not to get any compliance or audit reports. Okay. AWS Artifact. Yes, this is the service where you can go and download. We discussed it in our video course also. AWS Support. AWS Support is just to open any ticket for you when you sign up the AWS accounts. I had a lab and I was showing also. You can sign up for a free AWS support so that you can raise any service tickets related to your AWS account. Any questions? AWS Direct Connect, we discussed many times. It is for a dedicated network connection between the on-prem to the cloud. So the answer here is B. 45. Which AWS service enables companies to deploy an application close to the end users? So we discussed about this service also in our video course. So let's evaluate the options. AWS Route 53 is a DNS service. It is just for DNS resolution. It is nothing to do with hosting a close to the end users, right? Artifact, we discussed, it is downloading the compliance artifacts documents. AWS has auto scaling, that is for horizontal scaling and vertical scaling to scalable infrastructure to take more throughput. It is nothing to do with deploying close to the end users, right? So AWS CloudFront is the CDN solution which we discussed in our video course. So AWS CloudFront is the option here. So 46. Which AWS service useful for highly durable object storage, right? So which AWS service is a object storage service? I think it's pretty straightforward. You should be knowing by now the answer. EBS is elastic block storage. EFS is elastic file storage. We discussed in our video course. It is for database, any storage, EC2 storage, and EFS is like a NAT or a NFS or file storage system like shared drives, right? RDS is a database service, and S3 is the object storage service. So S3 is the answer for 46. Let me go to 47. A company wants to estimate the cost for their AWS workloads. Again, before migration, you can tell the answer here, which service will help. So I'll go through very quickly here. It's not budgets. Budgets is to get an alert whenever the cost or the forecasted cost of our AWS account can go more than that. That's called budgets. Amazon Cost Explorer is to analyze visually what services costed how much, correct? We had video courses for this, right? We discussed about all these things. Artifacts again is compliance documents, nothing to do with estimated cost. And I mentioned AWS has a service called pricing calculator is the answer here. It's a free service again. So 48, right? So which tool should a developer use to integrate AWS service features directly into an application? Okay, so this question is trying to check with you what are your options. See, remember AWS comes with a SDK, software development kit, SDKs. That is the most appropriate use. Like any APIs or any third-party softwares or APIs or applications, we integrate via SDKs. So remember here, AWS software development kit, SDK, is the appropriate option to directly integrate AWS service features into another application. Okay, AWS code build, code deploy are DevOps services, right? And AWS Lambda is a serverless scalable compute service. So answer is C here. 49. A music company wants to operate a data warehouse without managing the infrastructure. Which AWS service will meet this requirement? So they want, remember here the question itself says explicitly about data warehouse. I was talking about these options in the previous questions. Amazon RDS is not a data warehouse, it is a relational databases, right, for OLTP use cases. DynamoDB is a NoSQL database, not meant for data warehouse. Lambda is a compute service, serverless compute service, not for database. So Amazon Redshift is the Amazon data warehouse service. So remember the answer is B here. So question number 50, a company wants to grant access to AWS resources to access other resources in most secured option. Okay, so a company wants to grant access to AWS resources to from one resources to other resource in a very secured fashion. So this is one of the important one. So we discussed in our video tutorials. So in IAM we have users. So but users doesn't give access to other one. Again, users need access, right? We want not the users, not a human accessing the AWS resources. Here one service need to talk to another service secured way. Firewalls are not meant for accessing, right? They are for network controls, blocking the access. IAM credentials is not a secured way, because we cannot give the credentials to one service to talk to another service, but then the service client application has to store the credentials somewhere securely. So it's not secured way. Technically D is an option, but it is not secured. So in AWS, this is the best practice. You need to remember IAM roles. IAM roles are the best way to get access from one service to another service. Remember, there is no human here. One service to another service. That's the question is asking. Remember, the IAM roles is the option. Okay. If I go to 51 question, a company wants to audit what API calls are made at what time and on what AWS resources. We discussed about this service. I hope you can identify very quickly. CloudWatch is for our logs. IAM is for access management. Inspector is for EC2 anomaly detection, security vulnerabilities. So CloudTrail is for the API calls audits. Okay, remember answer B. 52. A company wants an AWS service to provide product recommendations based on its customer data. We discussed this about in our video course, machine learning service. They are trying to identify whether you have knowledge on which machine learning service is meant for what purpose. Okay. Amazon Recognition is for face recognition, image processing. Amazon Comprehend is for sentiment analysis or data, corpus of data, summarization or classification. What they are asking here is recommendations. It's like cross-selling, upselling. If you go to Amazon.com also, if you are purchasing some product, Amazon shows these are products are also recommended for you, right? That kind of product recommendations, if you want, what service helps in AWS? That's called Amazon Personalize. Okay, remember, Amazon Personalize helps you there. So the answer is C. Just to talk, Amazon Polly is for text to speech. Okay, so the answer is C here. Okay, 53. A company wants an automated process to continuously scan its Amazon EC2 instances for software vulnerabilities. So they wanted to scan continuously and EC2 instances for any vulnerabilities. Okay, which service will help? Let's quickly evaluate the services. Amazon Cognito is for IAM. Okay, not like Amazon IAM of yours. So if companies are building any third-party softwares and you have your users to sign up, sign in, Amazon Cognito will help. We discussed in this also in our video course. And Amazon IAM is for identity access management of the AWS consoles, right? Not for any scanning on the EC2s. So Amazon WAF is for web application firewall I was talking, right? And Amazon Inspector is the one answers here, which is for continuously scanning within the EC2 vulnerabilities. Remember, okay, within EC2 Inspector is the answer. So 54, which AWS service or feature allows user to create new AWS accounts, group multiple accounts and organize the workflow and apply policies at the group level? We talked about this so many times. Just to quickly evaluate, CloudFormation is for infrastructure as the code, budgets are for alerts for our budget spends, IAM is for identity access management. If you wanted to create bunch of AWS accounts and manage them like a group, AWS organization is the answer. 54B is the answer. So if I come to 55, AWS, a company wants to store and retrieve files in Amazon S3 for its existing on-prem application using industry standard file system protocol. So what they are trying to ask you here is, they have a software on-prem and it need to talk to Amazon S3 on cloud, and they need a industry standard file protocol systems. Okay, so the application is not running on AWS, not via SDKs. So what services you will use? Data sync is for syncing the data. It's not meant for here. Snowball, as I was mentioning, it is for offline data processing, not to access S3 from any third-party software, right? There is a Amazon S3 file gateway. Remember, this is a gateway which can be useful from on-prem softwares, can talk to AWS S3 bucket using S3 file gateway. Again, artifact is for compliance audit reports. So C is the answer. Remember this, AWS has gateways, file gateway, tape gateway, S3 file gateway, NF, like those things, okay? Volume gateway. So S3 file gateway is, these gateways help bridge between on-prem softwares and AWS cloud S3 bucket, okay? S3 file gateway is the answer here. So 56 question. A company wants to protect workloads from SQL injections. Again, this is a repeated question, but if you understand, not IAM, not inspector, not artifact. So WAF is the answer. 57. Which option is a benefit of using AWS for cloud computing? So let's read these things. Reduction of security and compliance. It doesn't reduce your security and compliance. Is this the really benefit? I don't think. Let's evaluate other. More workloads can be deployed. No. It's not just because you can deploy more workloads, that's not cloud computing. Pay as you go pricing. Decrease the speed, no, it increases speed and agility. So it's not, decrease is totally wrong. Pay as you go is the correct pricing. So in AWS, as I was telling you previously also, another way of telling is economics of scale. Rather paying fixed price, as you go you pay the more and more price, variable price. So as you use more, you will pay more, pay as you go model, right? So C is the answer. 58. Which AWS service or feature helps DDoS protection that safeguards applications running on AWS cloud? So we also discussed about this service. So AWS DDoS protection service is AWS Shield, and AWS Shield is the DDoS protection service, right? AWS IAM is meant for identity access management, inspector WAF. So AWS Shield is the answer for DDoS, remember. A. 59th question. A company wants to encrypt the data at rest for Amazon Elastic Block Storage EBS. The moment you get encryption, decryption, you should know who enables the required encryption. Okay. So this is like a shared responsibility model. You can think who has to encrypt the data at rest. AWS and professional services. No, this is when we can't do our self migration. We need help from any third party team of how to do migrate to cloud. If in-house technical teams cannot do, you can use professional services. AWS support is only meant for any questions you have. You cannot reach AWS support to encrypt the data. As a customer, we have to do ourselves. There is AWS managers is not a relevant answer. So answer here is D. We have to encrypt the data ourselves in Amazon block storage. Okay, because enabling or disabling, encrypting or decrypting is our options. So for 59, D is the answer. So 60 question. This is our last question in today's course. Which AWS service or feature can be used to retrieve information about network traffic both inbound and outbound? Okay. So they wanted to understand, the question are trying to understand whether you have knowledge on which network service, okay, will help you to identify the both inbound and outbound traffic. Okay. So remember, CloudWatch, CloudTrail are not for network. They are either application logs or API logs or events, correct? Lambda is a compute. So the only option left is VPC flow logs. So remember, AWS has a VPC flow logs, which is basically have all about network logs. Okay, how the traffic flown from which service to which service. This is primarily meant for networking team. So a question can come. So remember, for 60, answer is A. So I have gone through all the questions, 60 questions and answers and explanations. You can pause if you wanted to try yourself, each question yourself, and then see the answers. And hope this helps. These are the most realistic and real questions you will get in the exam. So I would recommend, so go through the video courses and some labs I was guiding, and go through these practice questions, and all the best for your exam. If you want more help on trying out the resources, I would suggest the website called taragati.ai. You can open this website, you can click on practice exams, and you can take any cloud practitioner mock exams. These questions are also has 30. They are like a duration of 30 minutes. These are like a real exam mode. Okay, the questions will evaluate so that you will understand them, and also you can take this exam multiple attempts, and you can see, download the report with actual answers. So I would recommend to take these exams before your actual exam, and all the best for your exam. Thank you.